And welcome back to another episode. We have the topic of how to reverse diet today, which is a really, really good topic because I think a lot more people need to hear about it. It's got some really great benefits to it. But before we dive into it, what it is, what you can use it for, and how to generally do it, we have a little bit of announcement to make. Bum, bum, bum. It's actually a good announcement. That sounded like it was a bad thing.
We need
What is
like a
it?
drum roll.
Oh, okay. I can do that. I don't know if you're going to hear it because of the microphone. Ooh, your microphone picks up everything, just like
Okay, hold
me
on.
hearing you eat your mango right now. If you're watching the
Listen,
video,
I'm
he's
new
got
at
a,
things.
he's like, this right here is a cucumber. I'm like, no, it's a mango, dog. Oh, there's your dog too. Yeah. So you have the privilege of doing the drum roll.
Nala.
Yeah. You want to do it? 3,
Yes.
2, 1, drum roll. And we are renaming the podcast, probably for the third time. And we're going to be calling it dun, 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 Logically Fit. Logically Fit. We're renaming it again. If you've been around since the beginning of the podcast, it first started off as Surviving to Thriving podcast. I don't know. I was just kind of done with that name. I felt like we outgrew that. We're evolving and growing as a business and our culture and our mission. So I felt like it was appropriate to rename it. But then I called it something very original, the Casey Miller podcast. And now we're moving it on to Logically Fit. The reason why we're making this transition is because, one, I originally started the podcast to just be me, and Toby came in every once in a while. We had some guests come in. I had some podcasts all by myself, but honestly, I enjoy this so much more when I actually get to regularly talk to somebody. And Toby's okay. He's all right. I kind of like him. So every single time we do a podcast, we both just really enjoyed it. We feel like we get in a really good groove. And both him and I have different ways of explaining things. We have different perspectives. I feel like we can provide a lot more information when we both come in all the time. But it's a little awkward to be calling it the Casey Miller podcast when Toby's always here. So we're like, let's rename it.
Listen, I can be Casey Miller.
But yeah, we decided to call it Logically Fit. And I feel like this name is really, really appropriate because the way that we approach teaching you guys, because both of us really just love teaching, we just love giving you the information. A lot of times people feel really overwhelmed when it comes to information, when it comes to nutrition, fitness. And the reason being is because part of it is just diet culture where we're starting to get smart. We're starting to see it's not working. Or you're in the middle of it and you're wondering why you keep failing and why everything's so miserable. But also then you start trying to learn more in different ways. But then you see on the other spectrum of just the extremes where while they are more maybe evidence-based, some of it is just, a lot of it's just not practical. It's geared towards the top 5% of the population. And we want to try to help as many people as possible. So what we're going to do is just combine the two. We're going to make sure that it is evidence-based. You don't have to worry about diet culture BS here, but we're also going to make sure that it is going to be practical. It's logical, right? And we're going to help you give the information that you need to become the CEO of your health. So we're really excited about this next transition. The cover of the podcast is my first attempt. It's probably going to get better over a period of time, but we got something new on there. And we'll just keep growing. At first, I was like, you know what? I'm afraid to change the name because this is the third time. But you know what? I do what I want. Who cares? Who cares? We're so new into this podcast. We're going to grow and we're going to evolve as much as we want through this whole process. And if we ain't having fun with it, then why are we doing it in the first place? So welcome, co-host Toby.
Hola. That's all Spanish I got.
That's all you have?
Yep, that's all I got.
What? How many languages do you speak?
Ooh. Speaking German, English, French. I can read Latin.
Interesting.
Yeah. So.
Which, by the way, for those of you who are new and you've heard Toby, if you didn't know this, he's actually from Germany. He's born and raised there. Came over here for football. And didn't you fly here? So you came here for college football, but if I remember right, you flew here to North Dakota in the middle of the winter, flip-flops, a t-shirt, and shorts.
Yep.
Yeah, because you had no idea where you're going.
Nope. I had no clue. I did not research North Dakota at all. And I walked onto the airplane, and the flight attendant said, "Do you know where you're going?" I said, "Yeah, to the airplane to Fargo." "No?" And she said, "Yeah, as long as you're aware." And yeah, it was terrible.
Fargo of all places in the United States. But it
I
worked
know.
out, man.
I
You and your
know.
wife live there. You got a really great community. You have your own gym there.
Hmm.
Um, really building, got a lot of connections. It's really cool to see. Really cool to see. Came to visit during when was it? The fall, the summer? Last time I was there?
It must have been the summer because we were playing volleyball too, right? We were playing
Ah,
beach volleyball.
yeah, we were. We were playing volleyball. Yeah, don't go there during the winter. If you don't know where Fargo is, it's North Dakota, guys. Like it's the tundra. I used to complain on how cold Nebraska is because that was where I was born and raised. But as soon as you go to like places like North Dakota, Minnesota, you got no room to talk. It's bad. It's horrible there. Okay. Well, you know what? Let's get talking about the topic that we actually originally wanted to talk about. Okay.
Which is what?
Reverse dieting.
Oh, dun dun dun.
Dun, 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 dun. So,
Oh.
Toby,
Hmm.
co-host, what is reverse dieting? How would you describe that?
Well, I would describe reverse dieting as gradually increasing calorie intake
Mm-hmm.
after a period of time of restriction, caloric deficit, being in a window where I consume less calories than my physiological maintenance calories.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why we're doing it gradually is to reboost the metabolism that has potentially adapted, because we want to, well, eat more calories
Yeah.
without gaining unwanted fat.
Exactly.
In
Yeah.
short synopsis.
Yeah. Yeah. And reverse dieting is something that you will follow after a successful fat loss phase.
You
Or
should.
if you are somebody that is chronically under eating, like you said before,
Hmm.
your physiological maintenance. When we did that podcast on how to determine how many calories that you should be eating every single day, which if you haven't listened to it, it's a really great listen. We walk you through how to figure it out all on your own, make it super, super simple. We call it your ideal maintenance calories. Okay. Because you can't eat, like your body is going to adapt. It's going to adjust. That's why you run into plateaus. And so let's say that you have been under eating, like you're in a calorie deficit for a long period of time. Your body is going to be very smart and it's going to want to adapt to it. So that way it's now your new maintenance. But that does not mean that is a good thing, because if you are chronically under your quote unquote ideal maintenance that supports really great physiological health, great mental health, building muscle or maintaining muscle, have really great gut health, hormonal health, and so much more. If you're under eating for a long period of time, it's no bueno for you. And so reverse dieting is a really great way to make sure that you mitigate fat gain during that time. Okay, as much as possible. And if you do it correctly, you can actually maximize muscle gain during that time as well, which we'll talk to you about that. For some people, they see some really great results where they don't gain a significant amount of fat. And in some cases, they can build really great muscle tissue and make that whole process a really, really enjoyable one. Okay. Now, the reason why we don't want to just jump from the calories that I'm at to maintenance calories, my ideal maintenance calories, is because going back to your metabolism is going to adapt. So that's your new metabolism. So if you just go up to your ideal maintenance calories, well, now you're in a huge calorie surplus. Okay. So that's why a lot of times when people go through a successful fat loss phase, they do a diet, they lose a bunch of weight, but then not too far after, they start gaining it back. It's because they were going back to what they were doing before, the amount that they were eating before, because they don't want to be in a calorie deficit for a long period of time. It's not sustainable for a lot of people, but they just make a dramatic change. And now they're in a huge calorie surplus. So now they gain it back. And for some people, and then some. So reverse dieting is a really great way to make sure that you are not under eating for a long period of time. You're not dieting for a long period of time because it's not a lifestyle. You can incrementally increase your calories slowly. So that way your metabolism can adjust to that, right? So that way, again, you won't be in an extreme calorie surplus. You'll do it little tiny bit. The metabolism will catch up to it, then a little tiny bit, and the metabolism will catch up to it over a period of time. We've seen a lot of people have some really great success with that.
I think beyond just metabolism,
Mm-hmm.
or your metabolism adapting, there is so much more beneath the surface level that happens when we are going through long periods of caloric restriction that we
For sure.
have to try to now reverse, hence the name reverse dieting,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's hormonal changes that happen. There will be occasionally like a psychological benefit to having the ability to eat more. For some people, it's actually a psychological barrier to having to eat more,
Yeah,
right?
it can
So
throw you for a mental loop, which we'll get
100%
into it.
reverse dieting isn't just about metabolism. There's so much more. The body is so complex,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which kind of like shows the importance of this, right?
Yeah.
And what irks me is that it's oftentimes overlooked. It's the reverse diet portion that comes after a successful fat loss phase is what a lot of people skip, which
Yeah.
is what leads people to losing weight, gaining weight, losing
Yeah.
weight, gaining weight. Because over time, what your body will want to do after it has lost fat and lost weight, your body will try its hardest to regain some of that fat that has been lost because that's your body's survival mechanism, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
yay, evolution. But so your body will fight you for to regain every pound that you've lost, right?
Mm-hmm.
So your metabolism will decrease, your appetite will increase, your cravings will come. So if you don't do this with a plan, this can actually backfire,
Yeah.
right? And I just wanted to preface this that just because we're talking about eating more calories after a dietary restriction, it doesn't mean that we're telling you to, hey, calculate your maintenance calories and then eat those tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
right? It needs time, it needs a plan, it needs to be carefully approached, but that doesn't mean that it is not important.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I usually tell whenever I'm talking to a client that their goal is to go into a fat loss phase. Like our one of our things that we need to do as coaches is just explain expectations of what it looks like, not only what we're going to be moving into, but long term. And so when we're explaining a successful fat loss phase, we talk about what's going into the fat loss phase. We're going to go into calorie deficit, but every single one of my clients has to agree if they are going to go into a fat loss phase that they have to agree that that is only half the journey and that they have to commit to the reverse dieting too. If they don't, then I'm not being a good coach because I could potentially get them in a position where they do all this work to gain it back and then some, simply just because they don't understand what it means to actually be able to get the results and keep it off, because nothing's worse than doing all that work and then going back to what you're doing before and going back to what you looked like before, your results that you had before, because it's not fun. So I always remind my clients, like, hey, like we're coming on the calorie deficit. We're coming on the end of your fat loss. We're getting close. But remember, that's only half the journey. We're only halfway there. We still need to go through a reverse diet. So it's extremely important. I would say it's almost a non-negotiable. I wonder if,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's a non-negotiable part of the process for a successful fat loss phase. But here's the thing that we do have to address is that it can be a huge mental hurdle for a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people, especially if you somebody who realizes, like, if you listen to our previous podcast on estimating how many calories that you should be eating, and you're like, there is no way that I could ever eat that much food. I would gain weight. Possibly, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Like, if you just started eating that much, that means that your metabolism is slowed down. So if you just start eating that much, yeah, you would gain weight because your metabolism is adapted. It's less optimal than it can be. But again, it's imperative, I think, for a lot of people, not only just be healthy, but to make fat less suck less. right? Like, for example, I mean, we've got a couple examples of clients that we can share.
Hmm.
So for example, let's go into that, and then we'll talk about like what does that look like, timeline, examples, and things like that. But let's show some examples, because I know a lot of people are like me. I'm a picture book person. I need like solid examples. I need visuals in order to see that. So let's go into that. So I'm going to pull this up. For those of you that are on YouTube or on Spotify, we can have that video, like pop up that video, because we're going to show some pictures if you're a picture book person like me. If not, the links will be below. I would definitely catch that. So we're going to go into presentation. We're in the handy dandy Canva right now. Present. Okay, cool. So here's a first example is one of our clients, Noel, which he started with us, and I did a podcast with him, talking him through this whole journey. By the way, he goes super in depth and provides a lot of really great applicable things that you can apply into your own journey. But in his journey, when he first started with us, he'd been trying for a long time. He was working out consistently. He felt like he was in a calorie deficit. I think he was talking to me. He was like about eating like 1,800 calories, which is not a lot for a gentleman, right? That's a decent calorie deficit for me. And typically gentlemen burn more calories than men. I mean, men burn more calories than women because they typically have more muscle mass, so on and so forth. So that wasn't a lot for him, and nothing was changing. He was stuck. No matter how hard he tried, no matter how much he was working out or anything like that, how well he ate or how little he was eating, nothing really moved. And so what that showed you is that his metabolism had adapted, that his new metabolism. Now, he could potentially just eat less than what he was doing before. He could potentially go down to, like, I would say probably like 1,400 calories to see a little bit more of a change. But 1,400 calories is the recommended intake of a toddler, right? We can both agree practically starving yourself is not good for you mentally or physically, right? And when you do get that drastic with a calorie deficit, especially if you've been in a calorie deficit for previously for a long period of time, that increases your chances of losing a lot of muscle mass, which is super important for having a high metabolism, getting the lean look that you want because you need muscle mass underneath it, but also is really essential for overall health, period. So you don't want to lose that. And also it puts you in at risk of other things like hormonal issues, gut issues. That's why a lot of people are like, I have hormonal issues or I have gut issues. Yeah, but that probably just because you have been under eating. Your food is more than just the calories that you're burning. It's also key nutrients to help your body to just function, period. So you're just putting yourself in a deeper and deeper hole that you're going to have to dig yourself out later. Just making it harder for yourself, plus eating 13 to 1,400 calories. Like, shoot me. Like, I'd be miserable. I would not. Toby, would you be able to do that?
No, I mean, depending on what the stakes were, if somebody was like, here is $9 million, and if you do this, I'm like, all right, fine.
Yeah.
Right. But if the goal is, the way I explain it is, I want this to be something that we can do for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and anyone and everyone can do adverse and very difficult things for a foreseeable amount of time. But eventually we will get to the point where we say, you know what? Screw all of this, and then we're
Mm-hmm.
done with it. And we've created now such a negative relationship to calorie restriction
Mm-hmm.
that I am not only going to do the exact opposite, but I am also going to be resistant to ever go back there again because
Hell
it
yeah.
might be super triggering for me. And now the thing that I need to do the most is now the thing that I want to do the least,
Yep.
right? And if your goals have anything to do with potentially having to decrease calories in the future and you are super resistant to that, um, you're going to find that you have a very hard time accomplishing those goals,
Yeah.
right? So,
Exactly. Yeah. It just, more is not better. Better is better. Okay.
correct.
So what we did with Noel is worked on let's make things better rather than just decreasing the calories even more so. Again, number one rule should be, not always is for fitness professionals out there, nutrition coaches out there, but it should be thou shalt not do any harm. So if we put him in a deeper calorie deficit, yes, he would lose more weight, but he'd be worse off than he started with us. So we decided to do it right and go through a reverse diet instead. So slowly over a period of time, we started increasing his calories. I believe, if I remember right, it was over a 3-month period of time. We started reversing his calories little by little. So these are small, little tiny jumps, maybe 5%, 10%. So a general rule of thumb is like 50 to 150 calories every 1 to 3 weeks. When Noel was working with us, we paid attention to how his body responded and make sure that we were doing this in a way that was conducive to him and his body, because everybody's going to change differently and adapt differently. But over a period of time, we brought his calories up significantly. I think we brought it up to, like, if I remember right, 26, 2,700 calories, right? And then from there, we brought him back down after he reverse dieted and spent some time in there. Mind you, he was lifting weights, he was getting stronger, he was feeling healthier, he had more energy, his relationship with food was getting better. So all things were getting better. Okay. Then that's when we decided to go back into a calorie deficit. And when we went back into the calorie deficit, he was actually losing weight off of calories that were more or just as many calories as he was eating when he got here to us. Okay. So by the time he was done with his fat loss phase, he had lost 30 pounds. I think that this all happened in a total of 6 months with him. And he was down 30 pounds by the end of his fat loss phase. And I think he started with a slightly higher calories than he was originally eating when he first got with us. But eventually, because your metabolism is going to adapt, we did have to get back down to, I think, about 17 to 1800 calories. But he was losing weight at that time. Okay. Remember, when he first started with us, nothing was changing. Okay. So what that shows you is that more is not better, better is better. If we can introduce a reverse diet, get your metabolism back up, not only is it going to make it significantly easier on you to see the results because you don't have to restrict so much, you won't be dealing with such low energy, but on the mental side of things and the physical side of things, you're just going to have a much better experience. You probably will be less likely to develop a poor relationship with food. You'll be less likely to lose muscle mass during this time. You'll feel better, both energy, your digestion, your mood, your sleep, everything will be much better. And if you feel better, you're probably going to be more likely to continue, enjoy the process, and keep doing the things you need to be doing to be successful. So this was a really, really great example of that. We have another one as well. The next one is going to be Anne. So Anne was my personal client right here. When I first started working with her, very similar to Noel's story. She was working with a total bro bodybuilding macro coach that was just like, it's as simple as just eat less and move more. Okay, great. And so when she came to me, she had an extremely bad relationship with food. She was even working with a therapist. And so the requirement for her to work with me is that I had to be able to collaborate with therapists. Totally fine. When she first started working with me, she was training in the CrossFit gym 6-7 days a week. She was probably only eating 1,600 calories at that time and nothing was changing. And she felt like crap, and her relationship with food is just horrible, like I mentioned before. And so the first thing that we did is we actually went through a reverse dieting process, and we even decreased her amount of time in the CrossFit gym and increased her strength training during that time too. And as we were going up, I believe she lost about 7 inches off of her body, but she also added, I don't even know, it was a little bit ago, but I remember her deadlift went through the roof, and she's not a newbie. Like, she'd been lifting for a while, so it wasn't newbie gains. She'd been in gym lifting for a long time, but all of a sudden she started seeing all these really great results. Not only was she feeling better, she was creating a better relationship with food and she had more energy, but she was also just like, her lifts were going up dramatically simply because we were eating more, nourishing her body more, and recovering more during that time. But then we got her up to about 24 to 2,500 calories for her. And then from there, once we got her in a good place, she felt mentally and physically better. Then that's when we started going into a calorie deficit. With her calorie deficit, I believe we never went lower than 1,800 calories. Never went lower. And you can see, if you're seeing the picture, the dramatic changes on the scale. So the first half, you can see this if you're looking at the video. I'm providing what her numbers looked like on the scale on a graph, where you can see it's a little bit more, there's a slight up and down, but when you average it out, it's pretty much a straight platform right there. And then all of a sudden it starts diving down. That decline right there is right when we hit that calorie deficit. By the time we got done with that calorie deficit, she was extremely lean. You can see the before and after pictures. Body composition changes night and day. Her glutes developed really, really well too. She was squatting like a crazy fiend. That was one of her things that she wanted to work on. And it was just great. But also on the side of working with her therapist, she by the time we were done with this, she was like, I feel like I can actually do this now. I feel like I'm not a slave to my food. I don't feel like I'm a slave to the weight on the scale. Just so many different other benefits to it too. Another thing to point out as well is that you don't necessarily have to go through a reverse dieting process in order to go into a calorie deficit after. You can use a reverse dieting process, if you do it well, to help simply just improve your body composition too. Okay, build more muscle tissue and see a little bit of fat loss during that time as well. And you also might see maybe a little bit of bloating and or inflammation going down too, because remember, we're talking about being in a calorie deficit for a long period of time and or under eating for a long period of time can cause a lot of harm to your gut health, your hormones. You can start holding on to a little bit more bloat, water retention, inflammation, so on and so forth. So going through a reverse dieting process can really help improve your health, help you build more muscle tissue. And in turn, like Holly right here, I have in front of you, you can see that the number on here is a straight line, right? Where we show her scale. Okay. Over a period of time, the weight showed that it was pretty much a straight line. Okay. But during that time, towards the end, it went down just a little bit. I think she lost a total of 6 pounds. But during that time, she's been eating 700 more calories than when she first started with us. 700 more calories. The weight generally stayed the same. If anything, it went down slightly. But she also lost, I think, about 8 inches. And if you look at the photos right now, like at the beginning, you can see a little bit of bloating, inflammation, right? And on the side at the end, just definition. You can see her abs coming in. You can see more of a developed glutes, more developed shoulders and everything. Like it's just night and day difference in terms of the photo. We don't show the face, but I've seen the face. We generally just cut out the face so we can just protect people's identity, but I've seen the face. It's also a lot happier. She's got a big old smile on the right too. So it's a really, really great thing. Again, it could potentially put you through a mental loop thinking about eating more, but if you do it correctly, which we'll share some general tips that you can implement to help make sure that this is a really great experience. But if you do it well, it can actually have some really positive benefits to it.
I think if we're like this right here, just the bar graph is a perfect example of weight in itself at maintenance or at maintenance calories, if I have finished my reverse dieting period, should be somewhat stable. Now, let's assume from my friends that like numbers that it does. But if we are looking at these pictures, it just shows that body composition, aka how much muscle I carry, how much fat I have on my body, and those kind of things, they can actually change dramatically, right? So if we're now playing a numbers game, and let's say I weigh 150 pounds, and of those 150 pounds, 30 pounds are fat. That is now a body fat percentage of 20%, right? Now, if I weigh 150 pounds, but I have lost 10 pounds of fat, but I have gained 10 pounds of muscle, now my weight is the same. But my body fat is 20 pounds, which is now effectively a little bit over 13%. So even though I weigh the same, I will look significantly better.
Yes.
I am physiologically in a much healthier state.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have gained muscle mass, my BMR has now, or my metabolism at rest has now increased, which means the chances of me maintaining my fat loss results have also grown,
Mm-hmm.
right? Through me carrying more muscle mass, I am now a little bit more resilient when it comes to all kinds of age-related diseases that will set in sooner or later, right? As we get older, our health usually declines. But even though the scale may not change, that doesn't mean that we are not improving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hey, Toby,
Mm-hmm.
keep talking. For you listening, I forgot to plug in my computer and I don't want my laptop to die. So, Toby, keep talking. I'll be right back. I promise.
Yes. So now that we're at a point of numbers, right? Casey already mentioned that there are a few rule of thumb things that we can do, right? So again, how do we implement a reverse dieting strategy? If you followed last week's, or you listened to last week's podcast and you now have found your maintenance calories, or you're pausing this one and just to do that real quick, and you find that you're actually eating a considerable amount under your maintenance calories, right? So what we want to do is we want to slowly, meaning let's say 100 to 150 calories in a day per week, um, increase my food intake while observing my body's response. If I gain weight all too much and it doesn't stabilize in a week or two, I just slow down a little bit. And if my weight doesn't change at all, I just continue to add, because again, usually the calorie intake level where my weight stabilizes after a period of restriction is where my maintenance calories are.
Mm-hmm.
Now, those calories that I'm adding aren't all created equal, right? So it's not just, oh, I'm supposed to eat more Snickers bars, right? It's the balance intake of proteins, fats, carbohydrates, fiber, vitamins, minerals. It matters a great deal, right? So even though when we do that, when we eat more food, we shouldn't necessarily change what we're eating, just how much of it. Now, on the flip side, for somebody who's eating a ton of food, right? Let's say my bulk of food comes from Costco pizza, Costco hot dogs. Burger King just sent us in the mail a bunch of coupons, right? So like I'm going coupon shopping and I'm eating like a lot of burgers, fries, those kind of things. And now my calorie intake is actually way above maintenance. In that case, just changing what you eat versus already trying to figure out like how much you're eating, right? Or like trying to hone down on your calories right away can also be great, right? And I just felt the need to put that in there because even though most of our listeners are probably eating less than they should, but there will also be the people that eat more than they should, right? And sometimes just addressing food quality rather than just focusing on quantity can also be a very good starting point.
Yeah. Can I go down a little bit of a rabbit hole? I
Ooh,
love how
good
you
luck.
brought up like most people that we talk about, which probably a lot of people are like, oh, that's not me. I keep gaining weight, so I must be eating too much. Remember, most people have been falling for and I have too. It's what we've been taught from a very young age. It's as simple as eat less, move more. So if you've been eating less and moving more, you've been dieting since the day, like since you can remember, or you've never really understood what maintenance calories is. Okay. More than likely, you have been under eating because people widely underestimate how many calories they should be eating. I remember the first time somebody told me that I should be eating like 2,300 calories, 24, and I about shit my pants. I was like, that is not what I need to be eating. And so I had been widely under eating for a long period of time, and my metabolism had adapted. And so let's say that you are that person, and now you go out to eat like a normal person. You have a normal dinner with somebody that probably dinner was probably 800 to 1,000 calories. For somebody who has a slower metabolism or suboptimal metabolism, that's going to put you in a huge calorie surplus unless you just don't eat all day. I mean, versus somebody who has a higher metabolism, because they have a little bit more wiggle room, they just naturally burn more calories, it probably doesn't affect them that much. They can fit a regular dinner in there without putting them in such a huge calorie surplus. So that's how when people undereat for a long period of time, they could potentially gain weight. It doesn't magically that your body just magically just starts holding on to calories no matter what you do. It's just those times where you do act like a normal human being or do enjoy 2 pieces of pizza or a cookie and what would be a slight over their calorie goals for a normal, like an optimal metabolism is now a huge jump for you. So you gain a ton of weight versus somebody who has a higher metabolism that's generally fit, healthy, has a lot of muscle mass, moves a lot. They can eat a piece of pizza without freaking out. They can eat a burrito and know that it fits within their goals. They're not going to be putting themselves in a huge calorie surplus. So that's a way to, like, I wanted to address that because I know a lot of people are like, no, it's as simple as eat less and move more. It's like, okay, dude, that's how you can potentially gain weight from under eating, and why like eating more could be a potential reason or a potential way for you to actually get the body composition that you're looking for.
Yeah.
So
That is why The Rock can post the pictures of his cheat meals, being as ginormous as they are and still look the way he does, right? Like he carries a ton of muscle on his body, so he can eat a ton. He has to eat a ton of food to maintain that.
for sure, for sure. I don't know what you were talking about before then. I just know that you went through a rabbit hole.
Oh, yeah, we were kind of like going into some little tips and tricks on how to implement a
Oh,
reverse
reverse
diet,
dieting. Okay,
right?
cool. Yeah, I love it. I love it. So with reverse dieting, um, 2 different times that you want to put through it. So going through the basics again. Either you're done with a very, very successful fat loss phase, you want to do a reverse diet, or you find that you have been under eating for a long period of time and you want to optimize your metabolism, then you start reverse dieting there. Okay. With the reverse dieting, I remember you saying just slowly, incrementally increasing over a period of time. Again, a general rule of thumb, it just depends on the person.
Hmm.
50 to 150 calories every one
Somewhere around there.
3 weeks ish. It's again, it's dependent on the person. Like you were saying before, you want to be paying attention to how your body's responding, right?
Hmm.
Is the weight incrementally going up steadily? I think another thing to point out that's really important is that you will gain weight during a reverse diet. You will. Okay. But that doesn't mean that that weight is going to be fat. Sometimes it is. Okay. Sometimes people gain a little bit and that's 100% okay. But that might be water weight because each gram of carbohydrate that you eat equates to 4 grams of water that your body will now start holding on to. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing, right? You need to be hydrated. Your body needs water. And so if one of the things that you're increasing as you're going through a reverse diet is carbs, you'll start holding on to more water. Another thing is like Toby was saying before, is if you're increasing those foods through quality of foods and you start eating more fruits and vegetables, which I think majority of people need to eat more fruits and vegetables in general. They're very, very low on that. And those things have a lot of volume. They weigh a lot, right? If you eat 600 to 800 grams of fruits and vegetables, right, that is going to cause you to weigh more. If you eat more general volume of food, you will weigh more. Okay. And then also if
Until
you,
you poop.
oh, until you poop. Yeah, that's true. That's true. But then also during our reverse dieting process, especially if you incorporate strength training, some of that weight might be muscle tissue. Okay. So some people may see the scale go up. I mean, I remember working with a girl that she was going through reverse dieting and she gained 8 pounds, but she lost 14 inches.
Yeah, it's I generally like to give the example of, because most people drive a car
Mm-hmm.
right? And if I'm driving my car onto like a very large industrial scale
Mm-hmm.
and I drain all the fluids out of it, no more oil, no more fuel, no more cooling fluids, no more brake fluids, no more blinker fluid, no more, no more nothing. Um, the weight on the scale will now read less.
Mm-hmm.
But if I now put all of those fluids back in, the weight of the car on the scale is now more, but it takes up just as much space as it did before in the room where the scale is in, right? So your body's natural energy sources, right? Your glycogen storages, as you're eating more carbohydrates,
Mm-hmm.
they will also fill up again,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when I take people through a fat loss phase, at the end of it, when we're done, the weight that I tell them that we are hoping for or that we are aiming for to be at after we're done reverse dieting is about 2% higher. So
Mm-hmm.
if I have dieted down to 150 pounds, I am probably looking to regain 3 pounds, right? Which is about 2%. So,
Mm-hmm.
right. So if I'm stabilizing somewhere between 153 and 154, that's probably where we can now hypothesize that we're somewhere close to maintenance calories
Mm-hmm.
after having decreased calories.
Yep. 100%. 100%. So, what are the things that would tell you that it's time to increase? What would you list out? I have a couple in mind, but what would you list out that it's like, hey, this is a sign that you're probably ready to increase your calories?
Well, it's twofold, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the one scenario would be if I have chronically dieted for a while
Mm-hmm.
and I am simply done making progress. The only way for me to continue to move towards that weight loss goal that I have is if I increase my movement by a ton, which eventually I will run out of daytime to do that. If I cut out calories significantly,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just done making progress. If I'm female and I'm experiencing negative hormonal health. So my cycle changes dramatically, right? I have that classic 2 3 p.m. energy crash. In general, I have very low energy. I'm feeling like my performance if I work out in the gym is declining heavily,
Mm-hmm.
right? It takes me longer to recover, right? I stay sore longer or I get aches and pains more frequently.
Mm-hmm.
Like we can continue to broaden that list, right? Now, if I'm at the end of a fat loss phase, the exit criteria or of a fat loss phase or the entrance criteria to go into a reverse diet phase are much simpler than that. As I usually say, I have lost 10% of body weight. I shouldn't aim to lose more in one fat loss phase sustainably. I have reached 12 weeks of deficit, or it, my body is done making progress,
Yeah.
right?
It's just simply adapted, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. I think also on the mental side of things too,
100%.
we need to take that in consideration. I know that I personally work with a lot of people that are looking to make sure that they can see results and they can prove to themselves that they can do that. But they've had previous experiences that just hasn't been good. And so, like you said before, it can be very quite triggering. And so, if you're starting to go in a calorie deficit, for some people, they get to a certain point, right? They get a certain point in their calorie deficit where they're either eating a certain amount of calories or they're feeling a certain amount of stress. And because that can be triggering, like old behavior patterns or like self sabotage starts creeping in. They start binging. They start having a negative mindset towards things or a negative perspective towards things. They start beating themselves up more. And it's really just declining their overall health and everyday life. that's when I would also take in consideration of just simply reverse dieting and taking a little bit more of a slower approach. Or I would even say more of like a diet break and see if the body will respond. But if it doesn't from there, then from there, like it's time to get out of the reverse diet. Because no matter what, I really don't think that your mental health, your quality of life in that extreme, it's worth it. It's not. You're not a bodybuilder. You can simply just reverse diet out, spend a little bit of time, and get back into a calorie deficit again. Will it prolong it? Yes. But the likelihood of you keeping it, the likelihood of you actually enjoying the process will go up dramatically. And if that does, the likelihood of you yo-yo dieting again, which is like just not good for us mentally or physically, declines dramatically. Again, like doing it right, it's just like, do you want to build a business in 30 days, make $1 million, but you have no social life, your family hates you now because you can't do anything with them, you just like turn it, you're mentally stressed, physically stressed, and you're just like not doing well and you don't sleep? Or do you want to take a little bit longer, take a couple more years, but you still get time with your family, you still get to live your life, you still get time to take care of yourself? Like, how you do it matters, right? So it's very similar approach. It's taking more of a longer game with that too, whether you're dealing with a lot of physical issues or mental issues as well. You can definitely put that in there. But so just to wrap it up really fast, a quick example of a reverse dieting process. Let's say that we have a client in front of us that needs a reverse diet. Like we said before, we're going to start increasing your calories little by little. General rule of thumb is probably anywhere from like 50 to 150 every 1 to 3 weeks. I always say this with my clients. I give them a choice. Okay. If you want to take a slower approach, it's going to mitigate fat gain. The slower, the better, but it'll take you longer to get out of the reverse dieting, right? Instead of like 8 to 12 weeks, it might take you longer. Okay. Versus we can take a little bit of a faster approach. Your chances of gaining fat during that time might increase slightly, but you'll get out of that reverse dieting process faster, right? And there's also a middle ground. We can find a middle ground too. But what are you okay with? Because no matter what you do, there's always pros and cons to everything. So some people are like, hey, I want to take this slower approach. I'm okay with that. Some people want to take the faster approach, right? So it's up to that person and what they're willing to quote unquote sacrifice. What's the trade-off that they're willing to do? Okay. Then once we create that baseline of what they're willing or not willing to do, then we start slowly increasing small little tiny jumps. So let's say somebody wants to take a little bit of a smaller approach or a longer, like small little jumps longer over a period of time. I'd probably start with, what would you jump the first jump?
Depending on how far we are under,
Yeah.
I would make a bigger jump. Well, and by bigger jump, I mean that in all respect, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I take 10 to 15% of the overall difference that there is, right? If my overall maintenance calories are 3,000 and I have been eating 1,500 for a long time, that overall difference there is 1,500 calories that I'm trying to make up over a long period of time. So I would at the most increase by 200, 250 calories, right? But for somebody who's close, we can get away with smaller changes.
Yeah.
If I'm post fat loss phase, usually because we have timed this very well, right? It's because you've been doing the educated way, right? You've chosen a evidence-based approach.
A logical way.
Oh, I like that. Look at that shameless plug.
Shameless plug.
You've accomplished a 10% reduction in body weight over an 8 to 12 week period. Chances that your metabolism is drastically adapted are very small. So at that point, usually what I recommend is taking the overall deficit that you've taken, right? Let's say I started my deficit at 3,000 calories. I ended my fat loss phase at 2,000. That's 1,000 calorie overall deficit. I would go straight up 50%.
Yeah.
I'm sprinkling that back in. We're trying to get to maintenance calories as quickly as possible to prevent that adaptation from settling in,
Yeah.
right? So
So if you've been in a strategic fat loss phase in and out, you're not haven't been in there for too long, 8, 12, 14 weeks, depending on the person.
something like that, yeah.
You can take a little bit of a bigger jump because your metabolism
Absolutely.
hasn't adapted as much. But if you've been under eating for a long period of time, or you've gone through a long fat loss phase, it's going to take longer for your metabolism to adapt. Plus, there are some people that adapt faster than others. Like, for example, when I go into a fat loss phase, my metabolism doesn't really adapt. I can pretty much just eat a certain amount of calories and it will just go down. Like, I don't have to play with it even more to keep going. Versus some people, they do have to play a little bit more. They have a fast adapting. But on the reverse dieting side, it's miserable. It takes a while for my metabolism. So I have a longer reverse dieting process than somebody who has a fast adapting. They could probably just reverse diet back out. So some people just adapt different than others. So just pay attention to that. But start increasing over a period of time. Normally, the big signs that I would say if we need to increase over, and we just keep track of how you're feeling, the weight on the scale, things like that. But if I've got a client who their scale is now starts dropping, okay, they're starting to see that they're losing weight. It's because the metabolism adapted. Now they're technically in a calorie deficit again, so we need to increase again. But some other things are, especially on the extremer side, if somebody's been in a calorie deficit for a long period of time or under eating for a long period of time, something that happens is that their appetite just goes away. They have no appetite. That's why I always say if you're a chronic under eater and or stressed person, your intuitive eating is probably not your thing right now because you can't rely on your hunger cues because it's not reliable at this time. And so I wait until if I know somebody's severely under, like I've worked with people that have been eating 1,200 calories and they're a grown ass woman with a couple kids. I'm like, we need to be eating more. And I increase their calories little by little because simply their appetite is just not there. And it's more doable for them to take smaller steps because they don't feel like they're going to be throwing up. And allows their stomach to catch up and not get super bloated or backed up or too, because again, your gut is not great. If it's not getting enough food, it's going to start down regulating. That's why you might be seeing digestive issues when you do eat more. It's because it just simply does not have the fuel to be able to work properly. And it needs time to adapt to that. So if I see somebody being like, hey, I no longer feel super full, I actually feel hungry, I feel like I can actually eat more, that might be another sign where I can start increasing more because I just know the body just needs more calories, period, because it's so low. Some other things are going to be, honestly, if the weight has stayed the same for a while, but I know for a fact that they're still under eating, right? Like their ideal maintenance calories is like 2,300 and we've got them to like 15, 1,600, better than when they started, but I know it still needs to be increasing. They feel great. The weight on the scale generally has stayed the same for more than 2 weeks. Then I'll start increasing little by little and see how that body responds. Is there anything else that I'm missing?
I don't think so.
That's about it.
We can probably make this as lengthy and as complicated as possible, right?
Yeah.
But for the most part, it should be this simple, right? It's a lot of people who try to make you adhere to super complex and complicated protocols and put a bunch of rules and regulations in place. I'm not saying that's wrong, but that usually stems from a place of insecurity.
Yeah, or it's just not applicable. Like, for
It's
example, bodybuilders, it might apply to them, but if it's a mom of 3, it does not apply to them. So it's just, again, the whole reason why we're doing this is just be logically fit. Let's just be reasonable with what we're doing, right? Not overcomplicate things that doesn't need to be overcomplicated. But that's a general rules of thumb. Like, and then you just start reverse dieting until you get to your ideal maintenance. If you start continuously gaining a lot of weight over a period of time, then you know that you're in a calorie surplus, adapt back down until you start steadily holding your weight, and or you just might be going too fast and you just need to slow down, right? But be open to the idea that your ideal maintenance calories might be different than what you have calculated to. Like I work with a girl that weighs 120 pounds and she eats 2,800 calories every single day just to maintain her weight. And when we calculated it, it was like 2,400. So It just is dependent on the person. Some people have different metabolisms than others, so be able to adapt and adjust as you can. But I think the last thing that I would suggest in this is that for a lot of people, especially for those of you that really need accountability, right? I know what to do, but it's a struggle to do it. Or you're somebody that's like in your mind, you're like, I know I need to be eating more calories. It makes logical sense to you talking about this, but honestly, it scares the crap out of me. That is such a huge mental hoop for me to jump through. Um, if you're one of those people and you can swing getting a coach, please do so. That's one of my biggest regrets in my journey. I've got quite a few. I made a lot of mistakes, but one of my biggest regrets in my journey is I went through a whole period where I was chronically under eating, and I had to go through a reverse dieting process. Like I could no longer deal with how I felt. Like my hair was falling out. I had no energy. I was moody, irritable. My eating disorder was just horrible because I was chronically being triggered. It was bad. And I couldn't take it anymore. I had to go through reverse dieting, but I let my ego get in the way. I'm a coach. I don't need another coach. I should be able to do this on my own. We are emotional beings. We are not robots. And especially if you are somebody who is like me and you're an emotional person, and this is also really pushing some of the things that you struggle with nutrition, fitness, eating more, the weight on the scale, defining your success only by seeing the scale go down, you're going to be challenging those perspectives, and it's going to be very emotional for you. And it was for me during that time. And I did not do a reverse diet very well at all. I ended up gaining like 30 plus pounds, and I did need to gain weight, but it didn't need to be that much. And I was extremely uncomfortable in my body. And it was just because I was extremely emotional. And I made all the mistakes and then some. There was times where I saw the weight on the scale go up, and then I just started eating everything in sight. And then I would restrict myself again, and then I felt out of comfort. So I went back into a calorie deficit because I knew that was comfort zone, even though I knew that wasn't good for me. It was what I was comfortable with. So I kept going back and forth, and it just turned into a big old mess. If I just put my ego in the back corner, like in my back pocket, and just reached out for support and accountability to hold me accountable to what I said, to make sure that they put blinders on my eyes and not get distracted by things, to talk me off the ledge when I needed it and help me talk through things, it would have been 10 times more successful than me trying to do it on my own. So if you are somebody that's relating to me, you're a little bit more on the emotional side. Toby, I know that you're more on the logical side of things, but you're just like, just eat a little bit, not a big deal. But I'm not one of those people, unfortunately. If you're relating to that story, I would just get a coach, get a coach in your corner, especially if this is a new concept to you. You have no clue how many times I've talked through people through the reverse dieting process, help them get over those icky feelings, because you need to get through them. In order to get on the other side, you got to feel those feelings. You got to address them. You can't just keep running away by just keep doing what you're doing before. It's like, so that's my big tidbit is if you can swing it, get a coach, have them help you through it. You're going to thank yourself later. But if you're a robot like Toby, who doesn't need, I'm just kidding, you're not a robot, but you're just very logical in your thinking. You don't bring a lot of emotion, which is true freedom, which is something that's very admirable about you. You might not need a coach, but somebody like me definitely would need a coach. So would you give any other tips during this time for anybody before we let people go?
Um, Realistic expectations.
Yeah.
It requires patience, right? It's divorce yourself from the end date.
Mm-hmm.
It's don't expect yourself to not hit any roadblocks. What we like to do for ourselves when we put a plan in place is that we make that plan without accounting for complications.
Mm-hmm.
We're not accounting for life happening. We're not accounting for me being sick, me having lots to do today, right? Me having to care for 3 sick children at the same time. There's just a lot that can happen.
Mm-hmm.
Life has the tendency to do that. And if I am putting myself in this perfect protocol that is almost a prison where it doesn't allow for those things to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I have the most perfect plan, I am not able to execute. So now the plan doesn't work. And who am I going to blame? Myself. Oh, I have the perfect plan. The perfect plan doesn't work for me. So I am just not worthy of results. The
Mm-hmm.
results, these goals are just not for me, right? We start to get emotional and defensive about not getting the results that I want,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whereas if I had just allowed myself the freedom for those things to happen, I would have just said, hey, I will eventually get there, but maybe not tomorrow. Those hiccups would have not affected me nearly as much as they did now that I put myself in this restrictive process, right? So be patient.
Give yourself some grace too.
Listen to somebody who's been through it so that you can avoid common mistakes,
Yeah, don't make the
right?
mistakes. If you have any questions, hit me up. I'm more than welcome. I'm more than happy to share that because I don't want people to go through what I went through. That was not fun at all. That was an emotional roller coaster. I cried way too much during that time. But I do have one final thing. I don't know if you mentioned this when I was grabbing my charger, but another really big thing to keep in consideration, because you're seeing a lot of the before and after pictures that we shared. A big component outside of the nutrition side of things, we mainly covered the nutrition side of things, but a big component that needs to happen to really see the body composition changes is make sure that you're also incorporating strength training during that time. Because if you want to see that body recomposition, you want to mitigate gaining fat, well, that increase of calories, put it to use by strength training. Increasing of the calories, you're going to use that to help you build muscle tissue and recover better. Not only that, but you're going to also really work on just becoming healthier as well. So just make sure that you're also incorporating a progressive overload strength training program. Remember, lifting weights, light weights, fast is not a progressive strength training program. Going in and lifting heavy, having rests in between your sets, making sure that you're seeing the weights incrementally or the sets or the reps incrementally push going up week by week. And you're keeping track of that progress. And you're making sure that you're also focusing on, I would also say, just like general health things, increase your quality of food, increase your protein as you're doing it too. But if you're doing that while you're going through a reverse dieting process, you will more than likely see some really great results with your body composition. Not only will you be
100%.
feeling better and you're setting yourself up for success for other things that you might want to achieve, maybe another fat loss goal or performance or whatever your goal is, but you're also going to be looking better versus somebody who's doing the reverse dieting process without strength training. You can totally do it. No matter what, we suggest doing that if you're in this situation. But you're more than likely going to see better results with it, right? So that's a big proponent that we would definitely suggest. Okay. So with that being said, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome to the first episode of Logically Fit. Yeah. So excited. If you guys have any other questions about reverse dieting or certain circumstances, please do not hesitate to reach out. We included all of our contact information below. Please do not hesitate to ask questions. We have that broadcast channel going on my Instagram. We've got close to 100 people in there now, and I do weekly Q&As, so you can ask those questions anonymously as well. If you have any suggestions on podcast episodes or even guests, because we need to start bringing on guests again. Any guests that you would like to see on the podcast, please let us know. DM us, comment on the Spotify or YouTube or whatever you're listening to right now. And we are more than happy to hear about that. And then finally, us doing our podcast while we love it. It takes quite a bit of time to get this going, edit it, post it, and everything like that. And we're more than happy to do it. All we ask is for you to help us with our mission by sharing this information with other people. Again, we're trying to get really great evidence-based but practical knowledge out there to help people become the CEO of their health, to teach people that they don't have to trap themselves in their own personal prison, that this can actually help them live their best lives, to become the best version of themselves. So if you found that this is helpful, if you feel like this is really great information, if you feel like your friend or your family member could really use this right now, please share this podcast episode with them, share it on your stories on Instagram, tag us, anything like that, anything that you can help us with our mission just to get that good information out there. All right. Co-host, you got anything else?
Have a good day.
Peace. Until next week. I don't know what the topic is, but we'll announce it. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.